Greetings. I'm Reverend John O'Toole. This is my second part. Now, when I started thinking about this in my head, I thought I could do everything all at once. And then all of a sudden it grew like a plant into something more. So not just working on my one thing, I wish to talk about a lot of other things because I just like to talk. You'd think I'd have nobody to talk to. So I'm going to try to remove the air conditioner noise running in the background, but today's the type of day that I'm not going to run without it on because it's a little muggy. So I will do my best to get it down low. But I can see that there's, you can hear it pretty good. So before I get too much farther into my own project, I wanted to talk to you about inverters and generators too. There's two types of inverters. There's a grid tie inverter, and then there is a regular inverter. Now, a regular inverter will do is it will run off a battery and then supply you with 120, 240. It would also give you voltage that is congruent to wherever you live. So if you're in Europe and you're using 230, whatever you'd be buying your inverters where you live, or you'd be sure that you're matching up your frequency and your voltage to match. Now in the United States we have a split phase 220, where in Europe they have a 230 without the split phase. So when they have two white wires or two black wires, and they're going to have 230 volts across both of them, and that's it. Everything runs off of that voltage for the most part, at least for domestic houses and stuff. I don't know about commercial and how that works, whether they got three phases or I don't know. I never really got that far. But in the U.S., you have 220 split phase. So in your panel, or say if you have an electric stove or an electric dryer, you're going to have at least 3 wires in that plug. And when you measure across your 2 hots, you're going to have 220 or 240 or 208, depending on your power company. And then the neutral line to one of those hots is going to be 120, or ground, but to your neutral line, which is your white wire to black, 120, neutral wire to the other black, 120. If you're running appliances, they require 220. They generally also require that other leg so that you have the split phase. Now, some things like hot water heaters can run on just that 240 voltage without the neutral line. So there are some appliances that will work. Some well pumps will work that way because they're running just on that. But you have to look into it. Don't just assume anything. All right. Now, when you have a generator, that's the same kind of thing. You have generators that are just 120 output, which are a lot of the small inverter generators. And you have generators that have the 220, 240 split phase on it. That will be a 4-pin plug, twist lock, and so forth. So the two different inverters, the grid tie and the non-grid tie. So many of these solar systems that you see on people's roofs all across as you drive around, they're using a grid tie inverter that is mounted on the panel, most likely. But some of them are in the power center, and some of them are up on the roof. It just all depends on the application and what you choose for a system. Don't touch the microphone, it makes noises. So Now, a grid tie, what it does is that there's a circuit that monitors your grid voltage in your house, and it will sync up the 120, 240 coming out of the panels. Well, the panels is going to be 24 volts DC or 12 volts DC or maybe 30 volts DC. Whichever it is, it's DC. And then it's going to go into a panel, into an inverter. It's going to convert it up to the voltage to line up with your house. And what the grid tie will do is it'll watch the voltage on your grid coming from the utility pole and sync it, because on AC you have a sine wave, and that's what it is. And you want both sine waves from the inverter and from the power to be matched 100%. If they're not matched 100%, you can cause fires and explosions and disaster. So it all depends on how you set up your system, whether you want to be grid tie or not. But you got to be aware that if your utility company power goes down, you have a pretty good chance that your grid ties will not work. Now, the exception to that would be to tie it to a generator and sync off the generator. And that way you could get your power and you could charge batteries. But, it's a kind of an extreme situation. Usually, most people that are going to have a battery backup are going to have a sub-panel that basically runs a primary circuit that will replace your utility in case you're off the grid. Or if you're off the grid completely, you're going to have a sub-panel that just runs off your solar and your solar batteries, and maybe a generator if you needed it. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of confusing, but you have to be very careful when working with electricity. It's not really that simple. There's a lot of voltage and current that can hurt you, and you have to really know what you're doing. And if you really don't know what you're doing and you're not confident enough, hire an electrician, tell them this is what I want to do, I'm going to get all the equipment for you, and you can hook everything up. And they'll charge you for it, which is fine. They're going to keep everything in code, and everything will be good. So as far as generators are concerned, you have to have a transfer switch somewhere in your panel to divert your utility voltage off of that panel, and you can put your generator on that panel, or you can put your inverter power onto that panel. And you have to do it that way. There are some scary people out there that'll hook up their generator through their dryer plug, and you have to make sure you turn off your main so that you don't backfeed, or if not, you're going to have a disaster. Don't do crazy stuff just to get by. You're better off running extension cords from your plugs off your generator into your house to power your refrigerator and your heat and your TV than it is to do something stupid thinking you're going to save some money. Don't save money. Transfer switch is about $50. $50 versus blowing up your service panel, causing all kinds of damage, and maybe even starting a fire. And if you start a fire during a blackout, it may be a long time before the emergency services can get to you. So I hope that kind of clears things up a little bit about inverters. The best way to do it is be standalone. Like this system here is going to be standalone. The power goes off and the system is going to be running off battery. And that's really a good way to go. If you live someplace where there's voltage around, good sun coverage, you could probably be on solar panels and your inverter all the time, and battery at night if you shut a lot of things down at night. I don't know if that all makes any sense to you. Hopefully it does, and hopefully it explains things. Because there are a lot of systems out there that are on solar panels that are on people's roofs, and when the power grid goes off, they're dead in the water just as if they didn't have solar. And that's just, it's just about what you want to pay for. You want the savings throughout the year or not. Okay. So, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is batteries. And so the batteries, there are basically different types of batteries. I'm going to bring up the All eStore website, and I am going to click on deep cycle batteries. A deep cycle, it means it's not like your little battery that's going to be in your flashlight. These are designed to be charged and discharged and charged and discharged. They're really designed for that. So you got lithium batteries, which are the kind of the new thing. Now the good thing about lithium batteries is that they can be discharged more, and they can be discharged many times, and you can keep them indoors. Of course, the lithium comes from, I think, Africa. So it is a hazardous, usually hazardous material that is challenging to mine and use and so forth. So, and interesting enough is that the lithium batteries are made up of these little tiny batteries that look like a C battery or a D battery, and they're 3.6 volts, 3.2 volts each. And usually these big batteries are already made up with a bunch of those. Of course, your cell phone has a battery in it that's flat, but the deep cycle ones are made with the round ones. So in the lithium batteries, you have to have a charging circuit on it to make sure that all the batteries charge at the same rate. You can't have one low and one high. Now, the next one is called the flooded acid battery. Now that looks like something you might see in a golf cart, or in the old cars. They used to have the batteries with the 3 or 6 caps on top, and you take them off and you look inside the hole and it says, "Yep, I see water, I'm all good," or "Oh, I see plates." Those are the flooded ones. They have to be outside or in a well-ventilated shed or box or something like that, because the oxygen and nitrogen that comes off of the charging process is extremely hazardous. So you can't have those indoors at all. Very dangerous. You want to make sure, like sometimes you might see batteries at some box store that, I don't know, and Harbor something, I don't know, something like that, and they'll say they have sealed lead acid batteries that you can use indoors, but they also say don't tip them over. Now, if they say don't tip them over, it's a good chance that they're not 100% sealed. So you want to buy your batteries, buy them from somebody that's reputable. A Trojan battery is a good battery. There's a bunch of brands out there that have been making batteries for years, and batteries that are used in like forklifts are also good batteries for an off-grid system. So that was, next step was the sealed, like I said, the sealed lead acid batteries. And then, there are different types of them that have different kind of metal combinations. But, and you have to, the other thing about the flooded batteries is that you have to maintain your water levels in the batteries, because the charging process will evaporate the water inside the battery, just like in the old vehicles that you had to check your water level, before they went to that maintenance free. And often the maintenance free still, you can take that cap off and look and make sure the levels are right. So you have to maintain that with distilled water. If you use ordinary tap water or other kinds of water, a lot of the minerals and stuff will collect inside the battery, and it's not good for the battery. So, I mean, you can certainly go out and explore what people use. And if you see somebody using a battery you don't recognize on YouTube, you can ask them why you made that choice, and they would tell you. And, you know, the other problem with batteries is that they're very heavy, so you have to figure out how to get your batteries from them to you. Some deliver, some don't, some ship them through the mail, so just you can take everything in stride. I live in the Berkshires, and if I was going to order 4 or 8, maybe 8, there's a place up in New Hampshire that I could get the batteries at the best price possible. And it just means driving up there, which is I don't know, 4-hour drive, maybe 5-hour drive. But then I save sales tax, and I get to see some nice countryside. So you all have to weigh all the advantages. There's somebody on Craigslist that'll pick up the batteries from Trojan in Worcester, Mass, and he'll drive them to your location. You know, he pays for it, but it's worth it. You know, if you don't have any other way. Nobody really sells Trojan batteries in the Berkshires, so you'd have to get them from a distributor someplace. So that's my topic about batteries. Now I have a couple of sealed batteries that I'm using. One's in the system that I'll be bringing over, and I have one that's behind me on my desk. Just dying to be removed off the, is that what you see back there in the background? I don't know. Might even see that over my shoulder. I don't know if that's the battery over my shoulder or what. Which side is which? This is this side. Yeah. Oh no, that's just the opening, the window opening. I'm looking at a little tiny screen. You're looking at a big screen. Give me a break, hey! I know when I go in and I look, I go, wow, look at that. I didn't know you could see that in the background. Okay, so the next topic is battery cables. Now, there's all kinds of battery cables. When I built my very first system, it was 12 6-volt Trojan batteries, which I drove up and bought them up at that store in New Hampshire and brought them down, and I built actually a wagon, a trailer, and it was all enclosed and insulated. I had 12 batteries in it, and I bought my cables, and I didn't know totally about how to figure out what size battery cable, so I used the number 4 battery cable when it should have been, it might have even been a number 6, when they should have been a number 2. So I was definitely undersized on my battery cable, and I bought them at Tractor Supply. Now, Tractor Supply does not use copper lugs. Now, a lug there's 2 types of lugs that are quality lugs, and one of them looks like this. It's copper. I've seen people take copper pipe that's the right battery cable size, and they'll cut it in lengths like 1 inch or so, and then they'll hammer down one end, and they'll drill a hole through it. And it's not a bad idea of a way to go, because sometimes it's hard to get these connectors. But if you go on eBay or Amazon, you can usually get them in a box of 25 or so at a pretty decent price. And the best ones are the copper ones, because you have copper wire going to copper fittings. The other one is that it's been tinned. Do you see the difference in color? Do you see the difference in color? So these have been tinned. So these are copper, and then they've been tinned. And they won't erode with the tin, but sometimes they don't give you as good a conductivity between the wire and the cable. So that's something to consider. Now, the ones that I got attracted by, they were steel with a plate. So before long, they all started corroding. And once you've done your connections, you can put some goop on the connectors on the batteries to keep corrosion from getting in. But the steel would rust and give you poor conductivity. So that's, again, don't buy cheap. You can go to Tractor Supply and get lugs, and if they have your right size, you're all set. Now, unfortunately, I ordered the wrong size. I had gotten these 8 ones, but the hole's too small. It needs to be a larger hole. It needs to be this size hole. And Amazon said I'd have it in 2 days, and then after the order was placed, they changed it to a week and a half. And they still haven't shipped it. You can get them off of eBay. It has good deals on them too. You just have to give yourself some time. Different sizes are harder to find. 8's a harder size to find. 2 size is easier to find. 2 knot, which 200 or 200 is easier to find too in a battery connector at an auto parts store or a Tractor Supply like that, or a farm store. Now, the other thing is about battery cable is it's better to type in welding cable than battery cable. You don't want to use house wiring for the DC side. You'd only want to use house wiring for the AC side. And that's an explanation that's pretty involved with talking about electronics. But basically, the more wires in the bundle, the more easily the electrons, which is what carries the voltage, can flow through the cable. So, like on this cable here, I just got to fan it out a little bit so you can see it. See that? See all the strands you have? Now, this is basically welding cable. And you might see battery cable, but it's really hard to bend and stuff. And that's because the actual copper fibers have more strands in it. It doesn't have as many strands in the cable, they're thicker. You want this to be copper wire, you don't want aluminum, because aluminum, if you don't have a good connection, can heat up. You don't want to use aluminum in your house as house wiring. The only place they use aluminum wiring in the houses is usually the entrance cable, coming from the pole or wherever it comes in from the street. But when you're wiring your house, you always want to be with copper because it's compatible with all the fittings. Aluminum is a good conductor, but you have to have a good connection with all your fittings, and that's where you start to run into problems. So with cables, there's 2 ways you can get your cables. You can order your cables in a spool like this, or you can order your cables pre-made from a dealer. Like, for example, in the Alt-E store, you can order your cables for your battery. Now, if you got a large battery bank, you want all your battery lengths to be equal in length, for going from one battery to the other, 12 inches or 15 inches. So the positive ones and the negative ones should be equal. And that just makes things flow better. It gives a better balance. So you can have them make it, and you can order them, or you can order the cable. It's kind of cheaper in the long run to order the cable and make your own, but on the other hand, it's a lot more convenient to just or the cable. You should still be able to make your own cable. That way, when you go from your inverter to your battery bank or to other appliances, you can gauge their lengths to match your system. I mean, sometimes it just works out. A 5-foot length works. Now, if you're going to be going over 5 feet, you want to go down a size in your size. So if you've got a number 2 wire on your battery bank, you're going to want to go to a number 1 from your inverter to your batteries. Now, something you want to have in between your batteries and your first device is a battery switch. Now, I'm using the C-Blue battery switch. It's got terminals on the back that you hook up the batteries to, and it's got a base, all kind of goes together, kind of like this, and mounts on your board. You can go with a breaker. It just all depends. You're going to have someplace to mount your breaker. So this base will mount to the board, and then this will clip into the base, which kind of works. And then, of course, you're going to want a fuse going between your batteries and your inverter, and your batteries and a charge controller, and your batteries and to a battery charger, depending on your configuration. Maybe you're using the inverter that has all 3 devices built into the same one, and you don't need to have 2 other devices for your system. It just all depends on what you end up doing for your design. Now, as I have mentioned before, you want to size your cable according to your inverter. Now, in making your own cables, what you want to do is have your lugs and your wire, and then the other thing you want to have is a special heat shrink, a special type of heat shrink.